Thank you very much. It's my very great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is online, Associate Professor John Kane from NYU. And he's talking about a subject that's very close to my heart, sharing starter knowledge online. I remember a PhD candidate of mine coming along, and she was very, very excited that she had discovered John's Medium column. And so I think both her and I are among the many subscribers to this, but it is a fantastic resource, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about both that, John, and also more generally your ideas and thoughts around sharing starter knowledge online. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Can everyone hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Yeah. All right, perfect. And so I will share um my screen. Okay. All right, so everyone can see my screen okay? Looks good.
It's good for
Okay.
me.
Um, all right, perfect. So yeah, it's really wonderful to be here after spending so many years using Stata and learning so much from the Stata community. It's just such an honor to be presenting at this. So really, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it a lot. Um, so yeah, the title of my talk is Sharing Stata Knowledge Online. And thank you so much for the kind words, by the way. It really does mean a lot. So existing examples and also how to do it more effectively. And so to begin with, personally for me, a really strong appeal of Stata has always been kind of how easy it is to use relative to some other software, combined with how powerful it is and how capable it is relative to other software, right? But finding resources online, as kind of was just alluded to a moment ago, they can be tricky sometimes, and I've seen this with many students of mine, right, and colleagues. Sometimes finding resources online can be a little bit difficult, especially things for like data visualization, where there's a lot of options, there's a lot of things to be aware of, a lot of guidance, a lot of do's and don'ts, right, and so that can sometimes be a little bit difficult. And that's important too, because data visualization is increasingly popular. So in my field of political science, right, like we're just increasingly going toward visualization and graphs and away from, having multi-page regression tables and whatnot. Also, users don't always know where to go to kind of get information about these new techniques and how to pick up new skills from Stata users, right? And then as authors, right, if we want to share knowledge, things that we've, learned ourselves or something, if we want to share it with our students or with the broader Stata community or colleagues, but that's also challenging to navigate sometimes. It's not easy to know how can we get this information out there to people? How can we share ideas and best practices and give people copyable code, for example, that they can work with? And so the underlying question, of my talk is just how can we both learn and share Stata knowledge a little more effectively, right? So I'll cover some common resources that I've certainly benefited from over the years, and as well as some of their limitations that I've run into, and then move toward discussing my own experience with using Medium and the advantages that I think it offers Stata users, especially in terms of learning and sharing Stata knowledge. Right. So the first question to begin, I think, is what do we want? Do we want a kind of specific fix or do we want general guidance, right? And sometimes using Stata, we just want a very specific fix. We might want to know the syntax for making a particular type of graph. We might want to know, what exact option do we need to add to get this thing that we want? And in those cases, there's a lots of places that we can go to online to get this kind of help. Right, so there's obviously help files from Stata. There's plenty of online manuals. Um, Stata List, which I've used a ton, and I know we all have probably used a ton. Right, we could just search Stata List. We can ask Stata List for these, very specific questions. We can also email Stata, which I've done, and they've been very helpful, very responsive, sending back, exactly what was wrong with my code and why it wasn't working and what I need to do to fix something. And then increasingly, I've had students use things like ChatGPT, which obviously it's not always accurate, but sometimes can provide that little specific fix that we need. Right? Um, but other times we want more kind of general guidance, right? Uh, for example, might want to know something about the best practices for graphing regression output, right? It's more general questions. How to use data with something like LaTeX, right? How and why to use particular types of bar graphs. How to make publication quality graphs, right, for academic journals, say. How to make maps with Stata, how to use Stata's graph editor more effectively, how to use Stata to make specialized graphs that are not native to Stata and maybe don't even have user-written packages yet, right? So all the resources that I mentioned already, they might not be very much help, right? You can't really, and I wouldn't recommend going on Stata List and asking something like, "How do I use Graph Editor?" Right? If you do get any response, you might not get a super helpful response to a question like that, right? It's just too general. So that raises the question of where can we go when we want this kind of general guidance, right? And so, as an example to illustrate this, right, I found on one message board someone had posted a few years ago looking for some good graphs. Does anyone know any websites or codes for great looking graphs? The pre-installed Stata ones aren't quite hitting the spot for me. I found a couple on some forums, but I'm just wondering where everyone gets theirs from. Like, this is a very common question that people, relatively new to Stata or maybe even longtime users might have, right? And so where can we go? Obviously, Stata has a YouTube channel, which I've used a ton and is very helpful. Stata also has plenty of online tutorials that are really, really helpful. But there are some limitations there. Usually, there's a little bit more emphasis on the actual statistics rather than on data visualization. When there are data visualizations, they tend to be a little bit more basic, right? They're not getting into the nitty-gritty details of options and things like that. They don't typically feature user-written commands very often, or tricks or hacks for doing things. We can, of course, search YouTube, just blindly kind of searching on YouTube for this kind of general help. But we, of course, know there's limitations there too, right? Sometimes the videos can be very outdated. They could use very old versions of Stata, for example. Sometimes they're just not great quality. It's not very easy to see what's happening on the screen. It's not always easy to hear clearly what the speaker is saying. And perhaps, biggest limitation is that they don't often include kind of copyable code to help us, just immediately get started with visualization, right? So those are some limitations there. Of course, there are various data groups and users and their own websites that are wonderful and that I benefited from. Of course, there's SDAS. And their graph gallery is great, and the code that they feature to make these wonderful graphs very useful. I've used it myself. Their individual users have their own websites and they talk about, data visualization with Stata. Those are really helpful too. And then on the right side, we of course have Ben Jan's absolutely wonderful coef plots website, right? Dedicated to all things coef plot, user written package for making regression coefficient plots. I've used this a ton, and this is a treasure of a website for being able to make regression coefficient plots. Right? But there's still some limitations with those as well. We can't necessarily ask authors questions directly. Um, it becomes a little bit difficult in terms of searching, right? The searching becomes a little inefficient. You can't search these websites necessarily to find specific topics or things that you're interested in. You have to continually check back for new content. Um, uh, Also, the kinds of content and examples on there are going to be limited usually, right? These are individual users. We can't be expecting them to be pumping out articles every couple of days. So the content, the examples might be a little bit limited, right? They don't always have detailed explanations. So you might get code for a graph or a visualization, but you're not necessarily getting an explanation as to why this code is being run this way or what this particular option is doing, for example. And then on the author side, right, thinking about it as, if we want to write something, we would need our own sites to kind of post this, and not all of us have an ability to, have our own website where we can feature, Stata code and things like this. Um, uh, and social media, of course, we could use, but that's not necessarily great for providing code, or reaching large audiences. And indeed, this is how I started making guides and tutorials. Literally, it was just I wanted to give more to my students than I could cover during class time. And so I would, take screenshots of my do files and code, paste it into Word documents, try to write what was happening in the code and give explanations as to what was happening and why I was doing something. And then I would put the graphs in there and the images in there so that students could see it. And then I would take that document, put it in like a Google Drive folder, and then just share that link to a Google Drive folder with students and on social media. And it's one way of going about doing it, but we don't necessarily reach a very large audience. It's not really copyable code, um, and so it may not be ideal for trying to share content with the broader community and with our students. So it brings us back to the question then, where should we go if we want this kind of general guidance, right? And so right after this question that was asked about finding graphs and whatnot, one of the comments was Ostrad has an ongoing series of posts on Medium. Right. And so Medium and Medium.com has very quickly become a really valuable resource for Stata users. Um, they offer longer form articles, the ability to write longer form articles. So not, a quick social media post of, a couple hundred characters or something, but really longer form articles that ones I've written have ranged from 5 minutes to 25 minutes long, right? And so this is great for sharing really detailed guidance with really no limit on how much guidance we want to give. It features the Stata Guide, and also the Stata Gallery. So the Stata Guide on Medium is just a whole set of amazing resources from Ostrad Naqvi, who many of you probably know. He's the creator of, I think, 25 Stata packages, right? And he is the one that originally discovered some of these Google Drive documents that I was publishing on social media. He's the one that reached out to me and suggested that I start publishing through Medium. And it took a little bit of persuasion, but once I started doing it, I really found it to be helpful. And so he has some of these amazing guides, Stata to LaTeX, maps in Stata, using Stata frames, right? Just wonderful tutorials that go into detail and provide code. On top of that, there's also the Stata Gallery. So the Stata Gallery is run by Ostrad, also, but it allows submissions from any authors, right? And so you can see here all of the different types of guides that are currently featured in the Stata Gallery, right? It's getting at it currently has hundreds of followers of this particular gallery, right? And there's a really diverse array of medium and longer form guides and tutorials here. And so some are on just general statistical techniques, some are on user written packages specifically that might not be very well known. Some are on really specific types of graphs or tasks that we might need to do in Stata. Some are on just general principles for better data visualization in Stata. Some are on data cleaning and data management with Stata. And then some are just on various tricks and hacks that we've picked up over time, and would like to share with others. So just as an example of some of mine, right? So I made one on regression coefficient plots, really aimed at trying to help researchers and people who publish regression coefficient plots in articles, just to show them some of the key kind of options to make nicer coefficient plots, right? And so you could see an example title of my Medium article, you see an example section of code, right? A code block, and then you can see an example figure from that article. And so showing how to make these types of figures and explaining what the code is doing. I've also made a sort of three-part series on bar graphs, right? So each one of these articles then links to the other two, and they cover all aspects of bar graphs, something that obviously is very common in data analysis, but it's surprisingly tricky sometimes, especially for students and people new to Stata. There's a lot there. There's a lot to be mindful of, and a lot of decisions that have to be made, and a lot of options. And so, how can we make them nice? How can we make them informative? There's a lot there, and so I decided to write a three-part kind of series on this that also covers a lot of user-written packages as well, things like coef plot, but also CI plot and cat plot, right? And showing users how to install these things and how to use them effectively. There's also things like guides on using Federal Reserve data with Stata, right? And there's a terrific article by Fahad Mirza on, 25 Stata visualizations with full code, just Stata visualizations that don't even have user-written packages yet, right? But that through some very clever coding, right, you can create these really intricate, awesome graphs, right? And he shows how to do that step by step, which is just really, really awesome. Then there's just stuff that's useful for teaching statistical concepts and sharing with students and colleagues. Right? So covering things like multicollinearity and regression or multiple logistic regression. I wrote one recently on interactions in regression analysis, a especially tricky concept for students. What they are conceptually, how to interpret them, how to run them in Stata and execute them in Stata, and then also how to visualize them and graph them in effective ways. So lots of advantages of using Medium, right? Those are some examples, but the advantages are vast. So there's a really large audience for Medium. There's over I think 100 million active users or active readers per month. Very present on social media, lots of Twitter followers, lots of LinkedIn followers. It's really easy to search for and share articles as well. So you could just search topics within Medium and easily find articles that way. You can also share articles very easily. So you just literally every article will have a link that you can share with students, with colleagues, with co-authors. This has been really helpful for me. I've been finding myself over the past couple of years just getting kind of emails sometimes from colleagues or complete strangers just asking like how did you do this graph, how did this happen, how did you make this, and it's just really nice to be able to provide a link and say like in this section of this Medium article just check this out and you can see this is the code that's doing this thing that you want. Also, it allows you to then post article links directly on social media that will take people directly to Medium, right? Lots of helpful engagement options. So you can follow authors that are putting out content that is really helpful for you. You can subscribe to certain authors and get emails anytime they publish new content, right? You can ask authors questions right through the comment section. This is really helpful sometimes for getting a little bit of extra detail. You can interact directly with authors. You can bookmark articles if there's things that you come across but you don't have time to read it right now. You can bookmark them. If there's parts of articles that are especially useful for you, you can highlight them so that anytime you return to that article, you'll see the highlighted section for yourself. In terms of authoring guides, if you want to author something, right, you can publish stories on your own, right? You could just publish them on through Medium on your own, but you can also publish them through these groups that have large followings, things like the Stata Gallery, which I mentioned, and also Towards Data Science, which has a huge presence on Medium. You can just submit articles to a platform like that, potentially reach, hundreds and hundreds of readers. There's also no limit, as I said, on length of articles, right? So they can be really long tutorials and guides, or they could be shorter bits of information too. Users, very fortunately, can see how long it takes to read these things. So they can see if it's going to take 5 minutes or 25 minutes or whatever it might be. There's also an option available to listen to any story. Of course, it's, an AI generated voice. So listening to an AI generated voice read through 20 lines of Stata code doesn't exactly make for, exciting listening, but it's nevertheless, I think, really useful, for non-code content. Of course, you can gain followers and email subscribers to kind of, increase your impact and get a sense of, how large of a community you're reaching. And one thing that I really, really appreciate is that you can edit articles anytime. So you could publish something, and then later you discover there's a typo, or a package has been updated with some new options, or Stata, right, comes out with a new version or something like that. You could just go back and update your articles to keep them current and keep them, very fresh versus publishing something on YouTube or something where once the video is done, it's done and it can't be edited. So I really appreciate that feature a lot. Very easy to use. And this is, I was a little worried when I first started using it. I was like, how difficult is this going to be? Because it looks very nice. But it turns out it's very, very easy to use. So here you can just see a quick, video of how this works, that you have a title, you have an abstract, you're then inserting a code block, and you can paste code directly from a Stata do file, just right into that code block. And then from there, you can, insert a graph, the graph that gets made from that code, right? And so that graph happens to be from a presentation I gave on data visualization to my son's kindergarten class, which went about as well as you'd probably guess, but still fun, right? But the main point there being, right, how nice it is to be able just to have a block of code that users can literally just copy and paste directly into their do file, right? How convenient that is. It's really, really nice. This is great for just sharing code and then also sharing, install instructions for user written packages. Some other advantages, right? Very highly visible. So in terms of search engine optimization, right? It's very discoverable again because Medium has this huge platform, right? So for example, I wrote a guide on Graph Editor. So if you just Google Stata Graph Editor, you'll first see Stata's own website. You'll see some YouTube videos, then Stata list. And right after that is my article on Medium, right? So very easily discoverable. Again, owing to Medium's just huge platform. Right? Lastly, other advantages. We get detailed stats. If you're interested, you can see some detailed statistics on your articles, right? And so this is one article that just got a surprising amount of attention on correlation versus regression. Um, and so we could see how many views it has, how many people actually read through from start to finish the article. And we can also see some information about how people are finding it. So is it coming internally, meaning Medium is recommending articles, which it's very good at, recommending articles you might be interested in. Is that how people are finding it, or are people finding it externally, right? They're getting it through email, they're getting it by searching Google or towards datascience.com or social media, for example, right? How are people finding it? So if you're interested in that information, you can get that too. In terms of the costs and benefits, there is actually no paid membership required at all to write articles. You can access a specific number of articles per month for free. After that, it will start prompting you to have a paid membership, but you can access a specific number of articles for free to read, and there's no paid membership required to actually write articles. With a paid membership, you can read unlimited articles, and I think it's $5 a month, and there's student discounts available on top of that. Right, so not incredibly expensive, and at that point, then you can again read unlimited articles. There's also a paid partner program. So I don't do this because again, my main motivation was to be able to provide guides to my students that they could freely access, even if they didn't have any membership. They could access as many of mine as they wanted, and also share with co-authors and colleagues. So I don't do this, but some people do, where uh, if your article is restricted somewhat to paid members, right, the more engagement you get, you would then start getting paid from Medium for this content. So if you're interested, that's an option too. And so in conclusion, if you're looking for just general guidance on how to get more out of Stata, or you have knowledge about Stata features, packages, tricks, tips, facts, right, that you've accumulated over the years, and you're willing to share that, right, I really strongly urge you to consider using Medium. I think it's very easy to use. It's pretty low cost. It's high visibility. There's a growing state of presence on there. And personally, I've really enjoyed my experience with it. Hope to make many more guides in the coming year, and looking forward to doing that. And so, thank you again so much for having me. It's such a treat to be here, and happy to take any questions you might have. And of course, feel free to connect with me anytime on any of these platforms if you're interested. So, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, John. That was a really interesting talk, and I think it's a nice addition to the Stata ecosystem. That it is such an inviting, warm community with so many people who put so much time in. That names like Chuck Hoover and Nick Cox, just instant recognition from anyone who's ever used Stata. It's a really nice community to be part of, and I think this is just another way of bringing that community together. So, has anyone got any questions online or in the room? Not sure if there's a question coming.
So, Andrew, it's David here. So, I've got a question for John. So, John, you've mentioned the way that you're writing your blog entries on Medium. Are you using Stata to write those blog entries?
I wish I could say I was. I would love
O-
to read a guide about how to do that. That would
Okay,
be great. I don't currently know. Yeah.
so you thankfully mentioned our Stata graph gallery. So we have a graph gallery on our website. Now, the pages and so this is where mine becomes a comment rather than a question. All of the pages on our techtips.surveydesign.com.au, all of the content is actually created in Stata. So we run a do file, which has got a bunch of dyndoc commands in it. And so you enter the text, you enter the commands, it will run the commands, it generates the output for you, and it puts it all into dyndoc for you. And then all I have to do is drop those HTML files up onto our website. And so if you're a corporate and or a university and you've got access to an intranet, you can actually just send those HTML files that dyndoc is creating and drop them, and you can save them directly into a SharePoint site, and those files become available immediately as fully formatted, fully structured tech tips. And so I've created a couple of them. Laura, who works for us in survey design, she created the do file that does all this magic. And I know Amy's used it a few times, and it just works beautifully for us. And so we're able to use the features of Stata to create those tips for us. So if
Uh,
you can get that connected to Medium, that would be that would be nice. So cool features of
yeah,
Stata.
that is very cool. I will absolutely keep that in mind. Thank you for letting me know. I know that within Medium, a lot of it is just kind of point and click to, for example, add graphics and add code blocks, but it'd be really cool to investigate if I'd be able to integrate it with Stata in that way. That's really neat.
So dyndoc is cool.
Cool.
And I see, John, that on your Medium page, you've now got 2 more followers during your presentation.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.